41.1 inches is the exact median waist for an American man aged 60 to 69. 35.5 inches places you near the slimmer quarter, while 44.5 inches places you at the 75th percentile. Yet a smaller waist, although generally a better metabolic position, does not by itself prove that you are stronger or more independent. You can find your place on that ladder in about 20 seconds. Stand relaxed, wrap a tape around your waist, and read the measurement without pulling the tape tight or holding your stomach in. That number is not a verdict. It is simply your starting position compared with men your own age. The United States reference data collected from August 2021 through August 2023 puts the mean waist for men aged 60 to 69 at 41.5 inches, or 105.4 centimeters. The median is slightly lower at 41.1 inches, or 104.5 centimeters. That distinction matters. The median means roughly half of American men in this age group have a smaller waist and roughly half have a larger one. So if your tape reads 41.1 inches, you are standing directly in the statistical middle for your age. But, well, the middle of the population is not automatically the middle of good health. At 35.5 inches or 90.2 centimeters, you are around the 25th percentile. Your waist is smaller than that of roughly 3 out of 4 men aged 60 to 69. At 44.5 inches or 113.1 centimeters, you reach the 75th percentile. Your waist is then larger than that of roughly 3 out of 4 men your age. And at 52.0 inches or 132.2 centimeters, you are at approximately the 95th percentile. That position is not a reason for blame. It means the tape has identified a higher rung where the metabolic associations deserve greater attention. Now consider the distance between the slimmer quarter and the 75th percentile. It is about 5.7 inches, or roughly 14 centimeters. These men can be the same age and live in the same country, yet occupy very different positions in relation to abdominal size, insulin, and type 2 diabetes risk. The tape still cannot tell you everything. It cannot measure strength. It cannot show how easily you climb stairs, how smoothly you rise repeatedly from a low chair, or how much physical reserve remains when you are tired and carrying something. A man below the age median may still be weak. A man above it may still walk quickly and move well. So we need to follow 2 things at once. First, your waist relative to men your age, and what that position suggests about insulin and type 2 diabetes. Second, whether your strength can efficiently move the body it has to carry. Together, those help shape the reserve you may depend on through the next 10 years of stairs, travel, errands, and independent daily life. An age ranking and a meaningful health threshold are not interchangeable. An average measurement only describes where other men stand. It does not certify low metabolic risk, and a below-average waist may be encouraging, but it does not certify strong legs, useful grip, or easy movement. Your belt gives us the ranking. Your movement tells us whether that ranking is translating into function. Yet the tape may detect more metabolic separation than it first appears, because the difference does not need to be 5.7 inches. If 2 men differ by just 1 belt inch, how far apart do their type 2 diabetes associations move? Across the population evidence, that 1-inch difference was associated with roughly 22% higher relative risk of type 2 diabetes. The calculation comes from the EPIC Potsdam cohort, which followed 9,753 men for roughly 8 years. Each additional centimeter around the waist was associated with an 8% increase in relative risk, expressed as a relative risk of 1.08 per centimeter. 1 inch contains 2.54 centimeters. Compound the association across those centimeters, and the difference reaches roughly 22%. That does not mean adding 1 inch gives you a precise 22% personal forecast. The study describes how risk differed across a population over time. It does mean that a small change on the tape can carry information even when the bathroom scale barely moves. The longer distance is easier to feel. Across pooled cohort evidence, an additional 10 centimeters, or about 4 inches, was associated with a 61% higher risk of type 2 diabetes. Nationwide Korean evidence also found that the relationship between waist size and insulin resistance became stronger with age in men. An expanding waist after 60 may therefore carry more metabolic meaning than the same change appeared to carry years earlier. The scale can still look reassuring. You may have a body mass index below 25, see yourself as lean or normal weight, and assume that settles the question. It does not. In EPIC, lean or normal weight men who also had a large waist showed a relative diabetes risk of 3.62. Overweight men with a smaller waist showed a relative risk of 2.26. In that comparison, being lighter did not cancel the importance of where the body carried its size. The tape detected metabolic separation that body mass index alone could miss. When Tom was 57, a specialist found his brain aneurysm, and that crisis led us to change his meal timing, movement, and sleep together for him. Tom is now 65, and he built the Noon Reset protocol as his 30-day guided meal timing system, gradually working toward fasting until noon with daily explanations and tracking, without supplements or calorie counting. If that structure feels useful to you, the link to his protocol is below the video. Back at your own measurement though, precision matters. Waist is a cardiometabolic proxy you can measure at home. It is not a direct visceral fat scale, and there is no valid conversion in which one added inch equals a fixed number of grams of fat around your organs. The population cutoffs show why. Japanese metabolic syndrome criteria connect 100 square centimeters of visceral fat measured by a CT scan with a male waist around 90 centimeters. Yet the International Diabetes Federation uses 90 centimeters for South Asian men, 94 centimeters for European men, and 85 centimeters for Japanese men. Those differences reflect how body size and ethnicity alter the relationship between an external tape measurement and fat stored inside the abdomen. Two men can have the same waist without carrying precisely the same amount of visceral fat. Two men at the same body weight can also occupy very different metabolic positions. So use the tape for what it can genuinely tell you. Track its direction, compare your position with men your age, and notice when a reassuring body weight conflicts with an expanding abdomen. Do not turn a belt notch into a visceral fat gram count or treat it as a diagnosis of insulin resistance. Then the latter reaches 102 centimeters, or 40.2 inches. At that point, the question is no longer only where you rank metabolically. It becomes whether the strength you still possess can efficiently move the load around it. That threshold is commonly used in male-focused studies of abdominal obesity and physical function. It is not a switch where movement is easy just below it and difficult just above it. Risk and function change gradually. The cutoff simply gives researchers a consistent point for comparing how efficiently older men can move their bodies. In a Cambridge cohort of home-dwelling men aged 70 and older, those above that threshold took longer to climb stairs and complete repeated sit-to-stand movements. They also had lower grip strength relative to body size and poorer muscle quality. The surprising detail is that their absolute strength was the same. At first, that sounds reassuring. You can still produce as much raw force as the man with the smaller waist, so perhaps the additional abdominal size is not affecting your function after all. Except your muscles do not move a laboratory number, they move you. The more mass your body must carry, the less useful that same force becomes relative to the job. You feel the difference when you climb a flight of stairs, and each step requires a little more effort. It appears when you rise from a low chair without using your hands, then repeat the movement before your legs recover. Add a bag of groceries while walking, or perform the same tasks late in the day, and the margin becomes smaller again. That margin is your physical reserve. It is the strength left after the ordinary task has been paid for. When the task consumes nearly everything available, an uneven sidewalk, a heavier suitcase, or a tiring day leaves fewer options. Equal raw strength is no longer equal capacity. The longer-term evidence sharpens that distinction. In the LS study, researchers examined dynapinic abdominal obesity, meaning weak grip combined with a waist above the functional threshold. Over 8 years, that combination predicted a faster rise in difficulty with activities of daily living than either weak grip or abdominal obesity alone. So the tape and the strength measure were not competing for importance. They became more informative together. A large waist increased the load, while weak grip signaled that the system moving that load had less reserve. The practical concern was not appearance. It was the growing effort required to keep ordinary life ordinary. You began with a ranking question. Is your waist smaller or larger than the waists of men your age? The more useful question is now whether your movement reserve is keeping pace with the body it must move. That does not mean a high waist percentile automatically predicts poor mobility. A man at the 85th percentile for waist size can still rank in the top quarter for walking speed. Training history, muscle, balance, joint tolerance, and daily activity can preserve impressive function despite a larger abdomen. so one tape reading cannot declare that independence has been lost. Pair it with what actually happens when you take the stairs, rise repeatedly from a chair, and walk at your ordinary pace. If those abilities remain strong, you have meaningful reserve worth protecting. If the waist is rising while those movements become slower or more demanding, the two signals are beginning to point in the same direction, and this exposes the problem with calling the age median reassuring. The middle measurement we started with already sits above the cutoff used in those functional studies. Statistically ordinary and functionally ideal are not synonyms. Age makes the comparison stranger still. The average waist continues climbing as men enter their 70s, then edges downward after 80. That late decline can look like metabolic progress on the tape, but the body may be getting smaller for a very different reason. For men aged 70 to 79, the mean waist is 42.1 inches, or 106.9 centimeters. Among men aged 80 and older, it falls to 41.0 inches, or 104.1 centimeters. That decline does not mean men automatically become leaner after 80. Height, muscle, and activity can all shrink. A man at 82 may therefore show a narrower waist while carrying less muscle and less physical reserve than he had with a slightly larger waist at 75. So a smaller measurement represents genuine progress only when capability is preserved. If the waist narrows while standing becomes harder and ordinary movement deteriorates, the tape is recording a smaller body, not necessarily a healthier direction. The higher rungs still matter, and the longer-term evidence explains why, without turning your measurement into a personal forecast. In a large European analysis, among men with the same body mass index, an additional 2 inches of waist was associated with a 17% higher risk of death. A 0.1 increase in waist-to-hip ratio was associated with a 34% higher risk. A broader dose-response meta-analysis found that every additional 10 centimeters around the waist was associated with an 11% increase in all-cause mortality. These are population associations, not a countdown for one individual man. Still, body mass index did not erase the pattern. The cancer prevention study, too, makes the separation especially clear. Among men roughly 50 and older, those with waists of at least 47 inches had about twice the mortality of men below 35 inches at the same body mass index. And within every body mass index category, each additional 10 centimeters was associated with a 16 to 21% increase in mortality. Reducing a high waist is therefore a meaningful objective. The harder question is whether an eating window reliably accomplishes that while preserving the muscle and function you need. 2 randomized trials tested eating between noon and 8 in the evening, creating a 16-hour overnight fast. At 6 months, researchers measured reductions in body weight and body fat among men and women, including participants with type 2 diabetes. The duration matters. These results were measured over months, not after several days of watching the scale or tightening the tape. And the eating window did not automatically outperform every simpler approach. One trial published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that time-restricted eating was not better than calorie counting for reducing body fat or visceral fat. Timing may provide a structure that helps someone sustain a pattern, but it does not make total intake, food quality, protein, movement, or adherence irrelevant. If you want that shift organized gradually instead of improvising your eating window, Tom's Noon Reset Protocol is a one-time downloadable 30-day guide built to work toward fasting until noon. The link is below the video. The comparison between different windows requires the same honesty. A 2025 network meta-analysis covering 41 randomized trials, together with a randomized trial published in Nature Communications, favored earlier windows beginning around 6 or 7 in the morning over later or noon windows for weight and insulin resistance. The reported difference in insulin resistance included about 3.3 micro-international units per milliliter in favor of earlier timing. Noon is therefore the written structure Tom and I use because adherence depends on having a consistent target that works in ordinary life. It is not a claim that noon is scientifically superior to 7 in the morning. The real test is not whether you can tolerate fasting until noon for a handful of days. It is whether the structure can move a high waist in a useful direction without allowing muscle, stairs, chair rises, and ordinary walking to deteriorate. That leaves the decision your tape cannot make alone. At your current rung, should reducing abdominal size take priority? Should physical reserve take priority? Or must both move together? If these age-specific benchmarks help you make clearer health decisions, I'd be grateful if you subscribed. The useful answer now comes from placing your tape result beside your movement, rather than allowing either one to speak alone. Start with the slimmer rung. If your waist is already near the lower quarter for your age and you climb stairs comfortably, rise repeatedly without fading, and walk with a steady, ordinary gait. Chasing an ever smaller measurement may not be the best trade-off. Preserving muscle and physical reserve becomes more valuable than winning another belt notch. At the statistical middle, the decision changes. Being average answers where you rank among your peers, but the functional cutoff we examined sits below that age median. So your measurement may be ordinary, while your body still requires more of its available strength to climb, stand, and carry. Your movement determines whether that concern is theoretical or already noticeable. At the higher quarter rung, direction deserves more attention. A stable measurement with strong movement is different from a waist that keeps expanding while stairs gradually feel steeper. And once you enter the range where the mortality association became much less favorable, reducing abdominal size becomes a higher priority. Even there, muscle protection remains part of the same objective. Losing inches while losing the strength to rise easily or carry groceries is not the kind of progress that preserves independence. At the highest age relative rung, the tape has identified a clear starting position, not a personal failure. The first useful victory is not reaching somebody else's waist. It is interrupting an upward trend while keeping ordinary movement available. A sustained decrease becomes more valuable when your chair rises, gait and stair capacity remain steady with it. That gives you two axes. One is abdominal load, rising, stable, or gradually falling. The other is movement reserve, improving, holding, or declining. Do not average them into one vague impression of health. Read the combination. If your waist is rising while movement still feels good, prioritize the waist trend before that extra load begins consuming more reserve. If your waist is falling but standing becomes weaker, stairs become harder, or gait slows, strength preservation takes precedence over celebrating the tape. A smaller body with less useful capacity is not the result you are trying to create. When both measures improve, the interpretation becomes much clearer. The load is decreasing without the machinery that moves it shrinking alongside it. If movement stays strong rather than improving, that can still represent a favorable trade-off, especially as abdominal size gradually comes down. The noon eating window should face the same test. Its value is not established by several light days on the scale or one unusually favorable measurement. It earns its place when the waist trend improves over a sustained period while movement reserve remains intact. Notice whether your noon meal also leaves you functional enough to walk, work, and move through the afternoon, but do not treat one spell of sleepiness or energy as proof of insulin resistance. Your waist rank tells you where you stand among men your age. Your movement tells you how much reserve that body still carries. Meaningful progress is a lower or stable waist without sacrificed strength. The best rung is not merely the smallest one, it is the one from which you can still move confidently into the next decade.